This is how we get social housing leases on our property. Are you struggling to get a social housing lease on your property? Or maybe you just don't know where to start with social housing. Social and supported housing has been around for a long time, but with the Renters' Rights Bill coming in May, there's a lot of landlords either leaving the market and leaving the industry altogether, or trying to give themselves a more hands-off approach by securing social and supported housing leases against their properties. But with so many different types of providers out there, how do you actually find the right ones? And then once you do, what do you need to do for them to get the property ready? When do you start? Do you buy first and then engage after? Do you do it the other way around? Maybe you're watching this video because you've already got a property that you think could work for somebody, but you don't know if it's right. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how we go about getting social housing leases on property and the steps that we follow to give ourselves the best chance of making it work. Follow these 7 simple steps and hopefully you'll be all right. If you do not have the time to do all of this and you want somebody to do it for you, then check out the link in the description and let's have a chat about how we can help you. A quick caveat before we start though, you do need to understand very early on that every provider will have different wants and different needs. Some will want blocks of 1-bed self-contained flats. Some might want family homes with an extra reception room downstairs. Some will need off-street parking as an absolute minimum, so everybody is different. So where are these providers? How do you find them? And more importantly, how do you find the local ones? I'm not going to state the obvious and just say Google them because that seems grossly unfair and it's probably something you've done already. So I'm going to say this assuming you've searched for local housing providers in your area, you've called around, you've spoken to people on the phone, and now you are completely out of options. If you have not done this yet, check out my video here, 5 actions to get a rent to social housing deal. Rent to social housing is a lot different now, but I do reveal 3 providers that you could call tomorrow and start working with. So good luck with that. So after that, one of the main things we do is go straight into Contracts Finder and look at contracts that have been awarded recently. This will bring up contracts awarded in whatever area that you have chosen in line with the keyword search you have done. My suggestion would be looking for things like supported housing, social housing and temporary accommodation. You can filter through by location, the size of the contract and the type of contracts in there as well. There will be a bunch to go through and after a bit of trial and error, you will learn what fits and what doesn't. From there, you'll be able to see who the contracts have been awarded to with the company names there for you to contact. Literally, just pick up the phone, tell them who you are, what you want to do, and ask whether they need help. Reference the contract that you saw, so it is obvious that you've done your homework and they can see you've been proactive in trying to find them. Keep a list of these providers too, because if they are active and applying for other contracts, there is a good chance they have ongoing demand for property that you may be able to help with. Number 2, how we approach providers. So how do you actually approach a provider? Bear in mind that a lot of these housing providers, especially the ones actively advertising to work with landlords, want this support in finding suitable property. They have connections with companies that provide the care. They have relationships with local authorities who trust them to house specific tenant groups, and they know how to provide a quality service to the tenants they support. That is where their specialism lies. Their specialism usually doesn't lie in finding property, negotiating with landlords, working with builders to get properties to the right standard, dealing with agents, dealing with investors, handling that whole acquisition side of the process. That is where people like us come in and help. A great place to start is leaning on your existing experience in property, especially if you're already a landlord. They will want to hear that for sure. Give a brief introduction to what you do and what your future plans are. But one thing I would say very clearly, do not go into this with the attitude that you can provide a low standard of property just because it's social housing, right? This is not a get rich quick scheme and it is not supposed to be some easy alternative to the private sector. If you come across like all you care about is making money and you have no concern for the tenants inside or the quality of the property you're providing, just don't bother with doing it at all. And to be fair, the same goes for the private tenants too. In the private sector, you need to actually care about what you're delivering. And the best relationships I've built in this space have come through intentional meetings, not just trying to force something off the back of one phone call. If you can book a face-to-face meeting, do so. If not, a video call. And if neither of those work, then at least have a longer phone call with the provider. From that point, if the provider's not happy to do anything and they want to do everything over email without giving you any proper detail or giving you the time back, I'll just move on to the next one, because they're probably not worth it either. Making sure the provider is right. The last thing anybody wants is the property getting trashed or the rent coming to a grinding halt. And yes, you do hear a lot about guaranteed rent. I've probably said that before too, but if you go with a housing provider who goes out of business, you can forget about being paid altogether. So before we do a deal with a provider, we want to understand exactly who we are dealing with. Make sure you fully understand the lease that you're signing with them, and make sure there is something in there that protects the condition of the property. Most providers will cover voids and maintenance periods, and this may also include malicious tenant damage. If something like this is not in the contract, then do not be surprised if the property comes back in a poor state. You may be housing tenants who are more inclined to cause antisocial behaviour, depending on their background. So the contract and the trust you have with the provider needs to be really strong. You need to know that they will deal with issues as and when they arise, so you can trust that the property is going to be returned in the same condition properly once the lease is finished and over. You'll find that providers often pay market rent, or sometimes even over market rent, depending on how strong their demand is for a certain type of property. But sometimes you will get offered way over the standard rent. And when that happens, make sure you check the company's financials and see how healthy they actually are. In fact, you should be doing that anyway. Make sure you check all their accounts and their finances to make sure they can pay you what they're saying they can pay you. You need to work out whether they can realistically afford to pay the rent that they are claiming to. And you also need to consider whether you can give them the property type they want, and crucially, whether you can do it within a certain time frame and a time period that works with them. When and how we discuss rent. For me, the conversation around rent comes after everything else has been discussed. Once you know what they want, where they want it, and how quickly they need this housing stock, and once they know who you are on their side and that you can actually help them, that is when I would ask about pay and rent. To be fair, a lot of providers are not precious about mentioning rent early, but I still think money is best brought up near the end of the conversation once the rest is very clear. To figure out whether it is too much or too little, all your due diligence should really be done before any of that anyway. If the rent is close to what you would get on the private market in terms of the gross rent, then you're probably onto a bit of a winner. You need to understand the costs. I'd massively suggest finding a decent mortgage broker to get you on the right type of mortgage product. Social housing mortgages tend to come from specialist lenders and aren't really found on the high street, so expect higher interest rates and expect higher insurance premiums too. A lot of lenders will also have issues around the length of the lease that you sign with the provider, so make sure the lease term you're agreeing with the provider does not run over what the lender's going to be comfortable with. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see people make. They get really excited about rent, but they haven't looked into the financing of the property properly. Number 6 is the logistics of making all of this work. Now, we source these properties for investors and for ourselves, and making sure everything runs in tandem is very time consuming. It's a job in of itself. You have to work out refurb costs in line with provider requirements, whether the buying and build timeline still matches the provider's need, whether the provider will still want the property once it's ready to go, how to manage local authority expectations because they may need to sign the property off at some point, when to engage with the provider, when to arrange the finance, what should be contained in the lease, how long should the lease term be for, what type of property should we even choose. That is really the bit that most people underestimate. Getting all of this right and in the right order takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. And number 7, what to do next. If you've got the time, do these 2 things right now. Contact as many providers in your area as you can and engage with a mortgage broker immediately so you can understand one of your biggest expenses, which is the interest rate. That alone will get you a lot further down the line, I promise you. Also, if you're still left scratching your head, wondering how these providers can afford to pay the rents they do, then watching my video on exempt accommodation just here might help. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.